And joining me now, Congressman Steven Horsford, chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, who was also at that White House meeting, Cornell Belcher, MSNBC political analyst, pollster, and Democratic strategist, and LaTosha Brown, co-founder of Black Voters Matter. Thank you all very much for coming to the Sunday Show. Congressman Horsford, you also attended that White House meeting. What more can you share about what was discussed?
Well, look, thank you for having me on, Jonathan. I think the Chairman Harrison laid it out well. Look, the Black voters are the base of the Democratic Party, and we are the voters that secured the historic win for President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. So it's imperative that the party, the president, this government, and the private sector included do what they need to do to ensure that Black voices are heard in the federal government, on Capitol Hill, and in the boardrooms. And that's something the Congressional Black Caucus is working on every single day because we understand that Black lives matter, and so do our voices when it comes to our democracy.
Mm-hmm. All right, Cornell, you are the pollster, and you pointed out on Twitter that there is a false narrative being pushed by the media that Black men are embracing Trumpism. I find that hard to believe. Explain.
Why do you find it hard to believe? It's in the data, right? If you look at over the last 4 decades, Black men voting pattern has been fairly consistent, right? Going back to '76, you've got 14% of African Americans African American men who vote Republican. And if you look at the validated research of voting that Pew does, look, in 2022, 6% of African American men voted Republican. So I think there's a lot of hay being made about some data from polls that are actually not representative. But I've also seen this before. So I'm always suspect of why you're trying to drive a wedge between Black men and trying to set Black men up as scapegoats. When you look at actual voting, not the polls, but actual voting, there is only a 7% difference between how Black men vote and Black women vote. It is the narrowest difference between any of the major demographic groups. So the pick on Black men, like Black men are just dramatically different than Black women, is a false narrative. Now, let me lean into what the chairman had to say, right? And the truth of the matter is, Chairman Steven Horsford, they have fought and pass a lot of great legislation that impact African Americans, particularly African American men. The problem is, Capehart, is when I sit in focus groups, the African Americans, particularly African American men, they have no idea. They have no idea that criminal justice reform was passed. They have no idea that voting rights was passed, and they fought so hard for it. And to your question that you gave, the chairman, DNC chairman, is what I would say is that not only must you say that we fought to get these things passed, Black men, you have to use your power to actually punish those who are standing in the way of getting these things passed. It's a messaging and a resource conversation, and I would argue that we have not spent enough resources actually messaging specifically to African Americans, particularly African American men.
And I just want to be clear. When I said I didn't believe it, I didn't believe that Black men would support Trumpism. I'm with you. I'm with you on that, Cornell. Please, internets, don't at me, just to be clear. Now, LaTosha, you are in it. In Black Voters Matter, you are in it. You are in the community. You are talking to folks. You are hearing from them. Why is there this big drop from the 87% of Black vote that the president got in 2020 to seeing 62% in that Morning Consult Bloomberg poll? Is it a real thing that the president's hold on Black voters is slipping?
I think Biden has a burden that's bigger than Biden. And what I mean by that is that Black voters, when I'm talking to Black people, they're very concerned about the environment. It's not just in what has been passed. People are saying, what are you going to do for me now? In addition to that, there's a lot of, when we know that a lot of young voters and first-time voters engaged in the process because they wanted to see criminal justice reform. That simply has not happened. We also knew that a lot of people that we talked to were interested in voting rights. and making sure voting rights legislation was passed. That hasn't happened. In addition to that, that there has to be the metrics. I think there's a disconnect in terms of the metrics in which sometimes the party uses as the metrics of success and how people see success. So while there is a low unemployment rate, there's a lot of economic anxiety among Black voters that I'm talking to that are interested in literally what does this mean economically in this kind of environment where they're seeing the rise of racism, when they're seeing the destruction of affirmative action and those kind of programs, that leads a certain level of uncertainty of what our economic future is.
You know, Latasha, let me stick with you before we go to a break. You know, President Biden's mantra, and I think it's a terrific mantra, don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. But if that alternative is Trump or any Republican, given all the things that haven't happened from the Black voters' perspective, is there any way that those voters would either vote for the Republican, or is the bigger danger they stay home?
You know, I think the biggest danger is staying home. I think that Black voters are actually more sophisticated than the media likes to give us credit for, that we're very pragmatic voters. And so at the end of the day, will there be a run to Trump? Absolutely not. I think what we'll see is people be so discontented with the process that they're so frustrated that they'll disengage. And so that's the bigger issue. And I think there are three things that we've got to do. One, it has to be more money. You have to make sure that they have a message. And I think I agree with Cornell exactly, that there has to be a message that's tailored directly to certain constituency groups. And that you have to make sure that you're lifting up, you have your messengers who is actually giving the message. When we're looking at television ads, that's not going to get it. That is not where a lot of people in the communities that we're talking to get their news from, or actually get the newest information around what Biden has done. And I think that those are going to be the three things that he's going to have to do going forward to get the bill to support that.
All right, everybody, don't go anywhere. We are going to continue this conversation with Congressman Steven Horsford, Cornell Belcher, and Latasha Brown after the break. Back with me, Congressman Steven Horsford, chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Cornell Belcher, MSNBC political analyst, pollster, and Democratic strategist, and Latasha Brown, co-founder of Black Voters Matter. All right, everybody, listen to what Trump had to say at a rally in New Hampshire yesterday.
Restore law and order to our communities, and I will direct a completely overhauled DOJ to investigate every radical, out-of-control, fake, crooked prosecutor in America for their illegal, racist, and reverse enforcement of the law. I am also going to indemnify all police officers.
I mean, it's chilling. I want all of you to respond, but Latasha, you go first. To my mind, just weaponizing DOJ is one thing, but indemnifying law enforcement, to me, he just put a target on all of our backs.
Absolutely. It's one, let's call it what it is. It's fascism at its finest. The bottom line is this is his dog whistle. This is the race. He has decided to weaponize race. He's decided to weaponize enforcement and violence. That is what actually he believes is his claim to fame, of actually being the support behind him and using white supremacy and this whole notion of literally creating a police state to be able to advance his campaign. And so that's why I think that the sophistication of Black voters, that's why I do not believe in any way that he will garner more support from Black voters. I do think it is important for us to not take for granted what the alternative is, but I think it's really important for us to understand how dangerous he is.
Cornell?
Well, first let me start by saying I want a Christmas at Latasha's house because the Christmas tree and the fireplace is absolutely killing
I know.
But what I also say is thank you, Donald Trump, for saying the quiet part out loud, because this is actually what we need to mobilize our base of voters. He's also been on record saying that he's going to invoke the Insurrection Act, and I can let Congressman Horsford tell you what that entails. But the outcome is not good for Black and brown people if he invokes the Insurrection Act. He's telling us he's going to be, in fact, a fascist on day one. And look, from a messaging standpoint, on the campaign standpoint, there's fear and there's hope. And that's sort of the basis of human nature sort of driving. There's fear and there's hope. We gave people a lot of hope in 2008. But there's a lot of fear to actually be invoked right now, because this man is telling you he's going to end democracy. And Capehart, I know you know this, but I don't think enough of our folks out there understand this. Black and brown people, you will not survive well if this man takes away our rights and ends democracy in this country. Those are the stakes. for this upcoming election.
Mm-hmm. And Congressman Horsford, I'd love to get your reaction to that, but also how the CBC's urging of corporate America to reaffirm its commitment to DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, is vital to thwarting what we heard Trump say, but also why it's important for corporate America to take it seriously.
Well, first, Donald Trump told us in 2016, he came to Black America and he said, what do you have to lose? And then he appointed an extreme, out-of-touch, ultra-conservative Supreme Court that answered that question by taking away fundamental rights, rights for women to have reproductive justice, rights for students to be able to access college on an equal basis, access for small businesses to thrive, and access to the ballot box. And that is why I agree with your panel this morning that the real issue is the need to focus on the 80% of the Democratic base, which are Black voters, to turn them out and to make sure that the resources, the message, and the messengers are in place to do that. I lead the Congressional Black Caucus. We are the largest membership in our history with 60 members, 31 Black women, 29 Black men, representing 120 million Americans across the country, 20 million Black Americans. And we're fighting alongside the Biden-Harris administration every day to protect the fundamental rights of all communities, but specifically Black America. And that is why we issued a letter to corporate America this week, calling on them to reaffirm their commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace, in the communities where they operate, and in the larger society to address racial inequities after George Floyd, and to work with us to close the racial wealth gap, which continues to widen. And we're not going to allow the tools of economic opportunity to be taken away from us, because that's something that Black voters also need for us to create better jobs, to start new businesses, and to build wealth in our communities.
Latasha, I'm going to give you the last word in the less than a minute that we have left. If President Biden were to call you today, get you on the phone, what's the one thing you would tell him to do?
I would say three things, quick: message, money, and messengers. To focus on literally, we have to shift the message that we need more money on the ground, and that he needs trusted messengers that represent those constituency groups that are going out crafting the message that our communities need to hear to get motivated.
Latasha Brown, a.k.a. the swank Mrs. Claus, Cornell Belcher, and Congressman Steven Horsford, thank you all very much for coming back to the Sunday Show.